The storm from the north. In the early Middle Ages, Europe lived in fear of ships that came from the cold northern sea. These ships were long and narrow, with dragon heads carved on the front. The men who sailed them were strong, skilled fighters. They were known as the Vikings. The Vikings came from lands we now call Norway, Denmark, and Sweden. Their homes were cold and rocky. Farming was hard. Life was not easy. Many young men wanted wealth, land, and glory, so they turned to the sea. At first, they attacked small monasteries near the coast. These places were easy targets. Monks did not carry weapons. They had gold, silver, and religious objects. The Vikings took everything. But soon, the raids became bigger and more violent. Villages were burned. Churches were destroyed, and people were taken captive. Among those captives were Christian women. Why women were taken when Vikings attacked a village? They did not only look for gold, they also looked for people. Strong men could be killed if they resisted. Young boys might be taken as future workers. But women were especially valuable. Women could be used as slaves. They could work in homes, farms, and workshops. They could cook, clean, spin wool, and care for children. Some were sold in slave markets far away. Others were kept by Viking leaders. In Viking society, slaves were called thralls. A thrall had no freedom. A thrall had no rights. They belonged to their master like property. Captured Christian women became thralls. The moment of capture, imagine a peaceful morning in a small English or Irish village. Smoke rises from cooking fires. Church bells ring softly. Tend soothingly. Shouts come from the shore. Viking ships have arrived. The attack is fast and brutal. Houses are set on fire. People run in fear. Some try to hide in churches, believing God will protect them. But wooden doors cannot stop axes. Women are dragged from their homes. Some hold children in their arms. Some scream for their husbands. Some pray. Many are tied with ropes and pushed toward the ships. There is no time to say goodbye. There is no mercy. The journey across the sea, the journey north, was long and terrifying. The sea was cold and rough. Captives were packed tightly in the ships. They had little food and little water. Mani vera sick. Some women had never seen the open sea before. They believed they would never see their homeland again, and for most of them, that was true. The Vikings did not see them as people with families and faith. They saw them as goods to trade or use. When the ships reached Scandinavia, the real suffering began. Life as a thrall, a Christian woman taken by Vikings, lost everything. Her name could be changed. Her religion could be mocked. Her old life was gone. As a thrall, she woke before sunrise. She worked until night. She cleaned animal stalls. She carried water from wells. She cooked food over open fires. She spun wool into thread for clothing. If she worked well, she might receive basic food and shelter. If she failed or tried to escape, punishment was harsh. Thralls could be beaten. They could be sold to another master. Families were often separated forever. There was no law to protect them. Forced marriages and relationships. Some captured women were not just workers. They were taken into Viking households in other ways. A powerful Viking warrior might claim a captive woman as his concubine. This was not marriage based on love or choice. It was foresaid. The woman had no voice. She might bear children for him. Those children could sometimes be raised as free, depending on the father's decision. But the mother remained a thrall. This created deep emotional pain. A woman might raise children in a culture that was not her own. She might be forced to abandon her Christian faith. She might live in fear every day. For her, it was a life of silence and survival. Slave markets and trade. Not all captured women stayed in Viking lands. Many were sold. The Viking world had large trade networks. They traveled to places like Dublin, York, and even far into Eastern Europe. Some captives were taken as far as the Middle East. Slave markets were busy and cruel places. Men and women were inspected like animals. Buyers checked their strength and health. Christian women from England, Ireland, and France were valuable because they were strong and used to farm work. Some were bought by rich families. Others were sent even farther from home. The farther they went, the less chance they had of ever returning. Faith under pressure. For many Christian women, faith was their last comfort. They prayed quietly. They remembered church songs. They whispered the names of saints. But Viking society followed Norse gods like Odin and Thor. Christian beliefs were not respected at first. Some women were forced to take part in pagan rituals. Some were mocked for their prayers. Some slowly lost their connection to their old religion because survival required silence. Over time, something unexpected happened. As more Christians were taken north, Christianity slowly spread in Viking lands. Some Viking leaders began to convert. In later centuries, Scandinavian kingdoms became Christian. In a strange and painful way, the suffering of captives helped change the north. Emotional and mental suffering, the physical work was hard, but the emotional pain was often worse. A captured woman lived with constant loss. She lost her home. She lost her family. She lost her language and customs. She lived among strangers who spoke a different tongue. She could not share her thoughts. She could not tell her story. Many must have felt deep loneliness. Many must have felt fear every day. Some may have formed small friendships with other thralls. Together, they might have shared memories of home. These quiet moments may have been the only light in dark lives. The children of captivity. Some children born from these forced unions grew up in Viking society. They spoke Norse. They followed local customs, but they carried mixed heritage. In some cases, they rose to positions of respect. Viking society was not always simple or cruel in every way. A powerful father could give his child status. Still, for the mother, the story was different. She remained marked as a captive. Her pain was rarely recorded in history books. Most records were written by monks who focused on the attacks, not the long years after. Resistance and survival. Not all women accepted their fate quietly. Some tried to escape. A few succeeded, though it was rare. Some resisted in smaller ways. They secretly kept their faith. They taught their children Christian prayers. They held on to memories. Survival itself became an act of strength. These women were not only victims, they were survivors of one of the hardest experiences of their time. The view from Christian Europe back in England and Ireland. Stories of Viking cruelty spread quickly. Monks wrote about burning churches and stolen women. They described the Vikings as monsters to Christian Europe. What the Vikings did was unforgivable. But history is complex. The Viking world was not only violent, they were also traders, explorers, and settlers. Over time, they built towns and married into local families. Yet the pain of those early raids left deep scars. Change over time. By the 10th and 11th centuries, many Viking leaders converted to Christianity. Raids slowly decreased. Scandinavian kingdoms became part of Christian Europe. The same lands that once sent raiders began to build churches. History moved forward, but the stories of captured women were rarely told in detail. Their suffering was quiet. It happened behind walls, in farms, in distant lands. There are no long diaries from them. There are no personal letters that survived. Their voices are mostly lost. Why this story matters. When we speak about Viking history, we often talk about battles, ships, and famous warriors. We talk about exploration and discovery. But history is not only about heroes. It is also about the people who suffered in silence. The Christian women taken during Viking raids lived lives of fear, loss, and forced change. Their story reminds us that war is not only fought on battlefields. It enters homes. It breaks families. It changes lives forever. A human story, not just a Viking story. It is easy to call the past dark and move on. But these events were real to the people who lived through them. The Vikings did what many powerful groups have done in history. They raided. They enslaved. They forced others into their world. It was not unique to them, but that does not make it less painful. When we say what they did was unforgivable, we speak from the pain of those who lost everything. The silence of history. One of the saddest parts of this story is the silence. We know the names of Viking kings. We know the names of battles. but we do not know the names of most captured women. They lived. They worked. They cried. They hoped. And then they disappeared into history. But their lives mattered. Final reflection. The story of captured Christian women during Viking raids is not just about cruelty. It is about survival. It is about cultural change. It is about how power can destroy lives in a moment. It reminds us that history has two sides, the side of the conqueror and the side of the captive. For the Vikings, these raids brought wealth and fame. For the women taken from their homes, it brought years of suffering. And though centuries have passed, remembering them gives them a small voice again. History should not only celebrate strength, it should also remember pain. Because only when we remember both can we truly understand the past.